The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Show Your Team Some Love. This is Caroline Cooper, and I'd just like to first of all check that everybody can hear me okay, and if you're familiar with the controls, if you can just raise your hand to let me know that you can hear me all right, and you can see the screen. Okay, that's brilliant. I've got a few of you raising your hands, so that assumes you can all hear me, and I'm sorry about the little blip earlier if you're seeing all my slides. For some reason I lost my control panel, so my apologies there. Before we kick off, I'll just run through some of the domestics, the housekeeping. So you should be able to see a little panel that looks something like this in your top right hand corner. If you can't see it, if you find the little red arrow which will be pointing outwards, just click on that and your control panel will then pop up. And in your control panel you have a little hand here which is for raising your hand, and from time to time I might ask you just to raise your hand for something, and just for those of you who've got your hands raised, I'm just going to pop them down again now. And just to let you know that you're all on mute, so if you've got any distractions, any noises and things going on in the background, then it won't interfere with the call. And I will open up the lines a little bit later on for any questions. Okay, I can see a couple of you just checking the controls. That's absolutely fine. So if you do just click on your hand and you're just doing it to check the controls, then that's absolutely fine, and then you can just pop them down again. You'll also see there's a little box for questions, and so if you have a question, if you just pop your question in there for me, and then I'll be able to pick that up. I won't necessarily respond to questions immediately all the way through, but I'll try and keep a track of those, so that if I've not answered them as we're going through, then I'll answer them towards the end. Okay, so first of all, why have I decided to do this webinar today? And the thing is that obviously the theme is to do with Valentine's, and make no apologies for that. But the thing is, you can't do everything yourself, and I know that everybody on this call wants to give your customers the best possible service that you can. And you can't be there 24/7, so you've got to have faith in your team. And I just find it so sad when I see people putting so much effort into their business and then they're just let down by their team. And it's not necessarily intentionally, it's just that the team have not been given everything that they need to deliver that outstanding customer service that we expect and that our customers expect. And sometimes it's to do with the tools that they're given, sometimes it's to do with the training that they're given, sometimes it's to do with the confidence. So what I'm going to be doing today is covering what I see as the most important strategies for inspiring and engaging your team to deliver that outstanding customer service or experiences. Before we do that, just for those of you who don't know me, I'm Caroline Cooper. I've got 28 years or so experience in hospitality, leisure and tourism. 20 years of that time I actually spent in management and leadership development, and my last corporate role was head of training for a company called Sodexo, which is a catering and support services company. And within that role, I had responsibility for some 55,000 employees, their training and development. And I'm not doing that to brag, but just really so that you know that the experience that I've got in that area and some of the lessons that that taught me. And I don't know why that is binging. I apologise. I'm going to just ignore it. For some reason, Skype has decided to kick in. So just bear with me. I'm really sorry about this. Really sorry about that, everybody. My apologies. One of the things, two key lessons that I got from the corporate world. One is that customer retention is something that doesn't happen by accident, and one of the things that as a company we're very good at doing was getting in lots of sales, but every so often people would take their eye off the ball in terms of retaining the customers that they got. And of course, a customer's experience is only as, or your reputation is only as good as the last customer experience that somebody has had. And if that's not been a positive experience, then they're going to go away thinking that that's how it is all the time. Unless, of course, you've built up enough of an emotional bank account that you know sometimes they'll just say, oh well, actually this is just a bit of a one-off, but you have to work very hard to even get to that particular point. And the other thing it taught me is just how big a contribution your team can have. And contract catering, as in, you know, I know a lot of you on the line today will be having a lot of people who work for you who perhaps have come from different industries, different professions, or maybe it's even their first job, they've got no skills or qualifications. And sometimes we think it can be really hard to get over what we want. So what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you today some tips that will actually make that a little bit easier for you as well. So let's get going and look at these 6 simple strategies for inspiring and engaging your team to deliver outstanding customer experiences. Now, we've only got 60 minutes today, and I'm going to share with you what I consider to be the 6 most important strategies. There'll probably be other things that you think of which are also important. I'm also going to be telling you about an offer that I've got on an in-house training program called my ACE program, which would help you put some of the things that we're talking about today into practice in your own business. So I'll be doing that 3/4 of the way through the session or thereabouts. So why is it important to engage our team and get them involved with that customer experience? Well, if we think about it, your visitors' experience and the interaction that they have with your team is often the most memorable part of their time with you. If you are a hotel, then yes, the quality of the beds and how fantastic the food is will be a part of it. If you're a tourist attraction, yes, the quality of the rides and the weather will obviously have a big factor on it if you're an outside venue. If you're somewhere like a spa, then yes, the treatment that you've had and how you felt afterwards, but with all of those, a massive, massive part of it will be the interaction that they've had with your team. And of course, that interaction that they have with your team is not going to happen by accident. It needs to ensure that what they're delivering is going to be in line with what your expectations are and what your customers' expectations are. And because you're all individuals, you and your team, it's a great way for you to differentiate your business, because you can be having an almost identical product to a spa down the road or an attraction down the road or a hotel down the road. but the interaction that they have with your team can be what makes it that bit different, that bit special. And it's not just your front of house team either. I'd just like you to picture the scene. Let's imagine that you've treated yourself to a day at a resort or a spa, and you're just going for the day, and on your way there you decide to stop off in the little village where this resort is based and just go pick something up. You want to pick up a local paper or something, or your favourite magazine so that you can read it while you're there. So you stop off in the village, and while you're there you see some what look like kids fooling around in the high street. And it just so happens that they're wearing a uniform that is quite distinctive. And then on your way up, the resort, the spa, is actually just tucked away a little bit in some woods, and it has a nice long sort of half-mile drive up to it. And as you're driving up there, admiring the scenery and just looking at all the little snowdrops and things coming up, and squirrels running across the road, and the birds, listening to the birds singing, and it's all very peaceful, and somebody comes charging down the lane like an absolute maniac and ends up that you're nearly in the ditch. And you think, is that one of the staff going off duty? And then you pull into the car park, and in the car park you then really struggle to find a parking space, and the only car parking space is right down the end of the car park where it's sort of gone off the metal bit of the road, and you're into the bit where it's all the gravel and it's all pit marked with potholes. And next to the building, all the plum parking spaces seem to be taken up with what to you look like staff cars. Anyway, you get out of the car, it's chucking it down with rain, you struggle with your umbrella because it's windy, and as you make your way to the entrance, you pass 2 or 3 members of staff who are quite obviously members of staff because they have a uniform on, and not one of them acknowledges you. And then as you get nearer the entrance, you see around the side of the building a couple of staff huddled outside with their anorak, with their hood up, smoking cigarettes. And you haven't even entered the building yet. But what impression has that left with you? Now, all of the people that you've encountered so far may not even be front of house staff. They could be grounds maintenance, they could be cleaners, they could be back office people, accounts clerks, anybody. But do you care? No. All you care about is that they represent that business. So for you, your first impression has not been a good one, and one that is probably going to stay with you. So when we're thinking about inspiring and engaging our team to deliver outstanding customer service or customer experiences, it's not just about customer-facing team. It's everybody in your team potentially has an opportunity to impact that experience. So let's go on to look at what sort of things contribute. That ability to deliver that amazing customer experiences. Well, there are 6 things that I've picked out. These aren't the headings for the 6 strategies, but there are sort of 6 key points that I wanted to just bring out initially. The first is knowing what's expected of them. And for your front of house team, you will have an expectation that they have an expectation about what's expected of them, that they know that, but not everybody necessarily will automatically know what's expected of them. They need to understand what are the behaviours that are acceptable or unacceptable. And if we think about, careering down the road at 30 miles an hour in what really is only, 15 miles an hour is a sort of safe speed to be going, that is a behaviour. They need to have the right knowledge, and that's not just knowledge of your products, it's not just knowledge of your systems, but it could include knowledge of what else is happening locally, knowledge of your customers, and so on. It's having the skills, and just as important as the skills on their own is having the confidence to put those skills into practice. It's having a level of ownership, because without that ownership, they'll do everything that you expect of them when you're there, but the minute you turn your back, they start to do your own thing, and that's not obviously what you want. And it's having that recognition so that when they've done a good job, that they know that they're going to get rewarded for it in some way. So let's have a look at what I consider to be the number one thing that you must have in place if you want your team to be meeting your expectations and also, importantly, your customers' expectations of service. And this is something that I actually insist on before I embark on any customer service training, because it's sometimes something that I think from the business owner or the management perspective sometimes gets overlooked. And for those of you who manage and own your business, probably your way is going to be the way. If you're in a business where you are the manager and there's a team of managers, or you're the owner and you have a team of managers, one of the things is consistency, and consistency with what do you want people to do? What do you expect of your team? So there are a number of factors here to take into consideration. The first of those is, what are your service values? And this is looking at it from your perspective. What are the values that you have? What are the things that you would are actually your non-negotiables in terms of service? What's the service that you want your customers to receive and what you want them to remember when they go home? What's the culture of your business? And when you think about that in line with what your customers will see and what they'll be on the receiving end. And then from that, you are then in a position to start thinking about what for you defines good service, what for you defines outstanding service. Now, we all know that good service on its own these days isn't good enough because everybody expects good. So do we want very good or do we want outstanding? But your team need to be able to make that distinction, because for them, good might be good enough, and sometimes we need to spell out what makes it different. Then we need to think about what's the end result. And I think everybody here has been exposed to the scripted sales call, or the scripted receptionist that says, "Have a nice day now." And we all know that they're doing that because that's what they've been told to do. So this is how you do it. But what's more important is what's the end result that we're looking for. Because if we want our customers to feel like they're having a spontaneous conversation with somebody, then somebody coming out with, "Well, have a nice day," doesn't really quite sort of sit with that, unless it is said very, very casually at the end of the discussion. And by talking about the end result, it allows your team to be more relaxed, more at ease about what they say, and it gives them that little bit of flexibility to adopt their own style. It comes over much more naturally instead of a formal script. Doesn't mean to say that you won't give them some examples of some of the things to say so that they know what you mean, but leave them to define for themselves what feels comfortable for them. Your vocabulary may not suit them. What's also important in terms of what do you want is to encourage your team to look at everything from a customer's perspective. So let's just take a sort of a ticket office or a front desk sort of perception. When you're stood behind the front desk, everything may look absolutely fantastic because your back is to the office that's behind you. But if you actually just step out to the other side of the reception desk and look the other way, what do your guests see or your customers see when they're checking in or coming up to the desk? And so looking at twisting everything around to a customer's perspective. If I'm working with hotels, I encourage them, for example, go and lie in the bath. What can you see when you're lying in the bath or sat on the loo? Because the person that services that room won't normally do that, and we need to encourage people to look at everything as a customer, or in this case a hotel guest, might actually see, and it may not be everything that you want them to see. So it's very important that you get your team and everybody in your team to look at things from your customer's perspective. And then thinking about the resources that we then provide in order for them to support this. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit more depth in a moment when we talk about consistency. So just sort of summing up that section, for me, one of the most important things to do before you embark on or ever expect your team to be delivering what you want to do, you need to define exactly what it is that you are delivering. And the thing about service, and a lot of the things that we talk about within service, is they are slightly intangible. When we talk about a warm welcome, well, what do we mean by a warm welcome? Are we talking about the sort of Labrador puppy sort of, all over fussy, fussy, fussy? Or are we looking at something that's a little less in your face, a little bit more discreet? And if we think, thinking about Valentine's Day is coming up on Thursday, and if you've got couples in, they're going to want a warm welcome, but they're not going to want people breathing down their necks and listening in on their conversations, I'm quite sure. So defining what we want. Okay, so the next thing is then the next question was, how do we ensure consistency so that your customers receive the same level of service on each and every visit? So it shouldn't make any difference whether it's their second visit, their 7th visit, or 70th visit. We need to ensure that there's consistency, and so that you've got confidence in your team that they can cope without you, because if you haven't, you will wear yourself ragged and you're not going to be in a good place to serve your customers well either. And if you have a day off and all you're doing is fretting about what's happening back at the ranch and that they can't cope without you, that's not a healthy position to be in. So how do we get that consistency? Well, we need to equip our team with the tools in order to do the job. So what are the tools to do the job? Well, the first is, that, as we touched on earlier, is having the right resources. Now, the resources could be to do with having the right tools and the right ingredients, but it potentially goes a little bit beyond that, because I'm sure we've all been in situations where there's been too much red tape, or we've had staff shortages, or we've had unreliable equipment, or we've had a poor product. And all this does is it leads to frustration on your part and on the part of your team, because with the best will in the world, even somebody that is just so determined to do a good job, if you are really, really short-staffed, or you have got systems in place which make it impossible for anyone to go outside the parameters of that, then you've got a hiding into nothing, really. So making sure that the resources are your systems, they are your tools, they're your ingredients, the raw ingredients to do the job. I'm not just talking about food, but they could be the raw ingredients to actually deliver. So if you're a spa, making sure you've got the right quality products. Allowing people the time to do things. People who are rushed make mistakes. And of course that then has an impact on our customers. And that you've got not only sufficient people, but the right people in the right jobs. And I'm just going to come back to the previous section on the number one thing that you must have in place. If you know exactly what your values are and how you define customer service, when it comes to recruitment, for goodness sake, don't recruit people that could never deliver that. So when we're recruiting people, we need to have somebody that has that same culture, that same ethos towards delivering good service and delivering good experiences. And if they can't get their head around that, then they're not the right people for your business. The skills you can train. I know that there are some things, obviously, people will need the right qualifications in order to do it. So, a chef or a therapist, for example, are going to need the right qualifications. But there are some roles, actually, where their attitude is far more important than their past experience or the skills that they already have. So making sure, when we're talking about resources, make sure that you've got the right people and the right mix of people within your team. Then we need to think about the behaviours. Oops. So what are the things that we want them to be doing? So if we think back to the scenario that we described earlier with you arriving at the spa or the resort and encountering lots of people that weren't necessarily giving off the right impression, do you think that any of this was a deliberate ploy on those people's part to undermine the customer experience? No. The thing is that sometimes it just doesn't even occur to people how they are perceived, particularly when they're off duty. So we need to educate them and let them know what are the behaviours that we're looking for, both on and off duty. And that obviously needs to form part of their induction. It might even go back to the interview when you recruit them in the first place, but also about bringing that to life. So getting them to put themselves in the customer's position to identify what impression they give versus what customers might expect from them. We also need to give people the right knowledge, and we just touched on this earlier. Now, obviously, knowledge of the systems and the way things are done around here is very important. But what's also important is your team need to know your products and services inside out. Because irrespective of the department that they work in, if they see an opportunity to sell something to a customer or add value to a customer, and they don't know about it, then they're not going to be able to add value. And in fact, absolutely the opposite, because if the customer then asks them about it and they're not able to respond, then that of course reflects badly on them and leaves the customer unhappy. So educating your team in everything that you offer, and you know the easiest way to do that is it's to me absolutely blindingly obvious, and you'll think actually yeah, that does just make so much sense, is get them to experience everything as a customer sees it. So if you have a spa, let your team experience the different spa treatments, because how can they describe a treatment to a client if they've never experienced it themselves, or they've never even seen the treatment rooms? If you have a visitor attraction and you've got some particular activities that maybe, you know, whether they're for adults or whether they're for kids, again, get your team to experience them so that they know what they're like. They know whether they're suitable for a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 105-year-old, so that they see it for themselves or they experience it for themselves. If you're in a hotel, when was the last time you or any of your team slept in any of your rooms? Do your receptionists or do your waiting staff know the difference between a superior room and a standard room? So if they get asked and they get an opportunity to think about upgrading a guest, that they know what the distinction is. So the more that they've experienced it for themselves, the easier it is for them to talk about them, the easier it is for them to sell them. And what makes it even better is that if they've experienced things, people buy from experience, they buy from people's emotions. They can actually put some emotion into that particular product or that service when they're talking about it. So it just helps to bring the whole thing to life. Now, I'm not saying that your team need to be walking encyclopedias about every finite little detail, but the least that they need to be able to do is what are the core offers, but also that they then know who to go to if they get an inquiry about something. Yeah, I'm not the best person to speak to about this, but let me bring Sharon over because she knows all about this and she'll be able to tell you. So that they need to know who to go to. With that knowledge, they also need knowledge of who your customers are and what's important to them, because we talked earlier about our expectations for service. What are our customers' expectations? What will they be doing? What are the types of people that you are attracting to your business? And what are the things that they're going to be interested in? We then need to give them the right skills in order to do their job. So just thinking back to earlier, we talked about recruiting people with the right attitude. We then need to give them the skills in order to do that job. And this includes giving them still that flexibility to do things their own way. So rather than scripting it, allow them to develop their own dialogue, their own language, and talking about what's the end result, but giving them the techniques that they use and the mechanics in order to be able to do that effectively. So for example, if they're in a sales role, making sure that they know how to ask open questions, that they know how to listen effectively. as an example. And then building all of that is that we then need to ensure that we build their confidence, because knowing what to say is one thing, putting it into practice sometimes is something that's very, very different. And quite often what happens is that in a classroom environment that they're given the skills to do have a particular conversation with a customer, so it could be to deal with complaints or it could be to deal with upselling or something of that nature, but then when they're confronted with the customer, they just freeze. So it's very, very different. So we can talk about it in theory, we can talk about it, we give them the practice in a safe environment, we need to be able to give them feedback, we need to be able to pick up and coach them and support them, which really then comes on to the last point, giving them that support that they need in order to do that. And if you've got the resources in place and you've given them the knowledge and the skills, those things will then help to fall into place. But of all of those 6 things, that confidence, that opportunity to practice, for me is absolutely key. So everything that we talked about there is to do with getting that consistency. So how do we then take that one step further and think about the 3 key principles to get your team taking responsibility and using their initiative, so that you can go on holiday for 2 weeks and know that things are surviving without you while you're not there. So there are three key things here. The first is that you communicate with your team. Now, a lot of what we've already talked about is about communication. So that's sort of setting up your store, about what you expect, and then giving them the tools, the skills, the resources, the confidence to do those things. But communication isn't something that is just, it's not a done job. You know, once you've done all of that, you don't just stop communicating. It's a continual drip feed. So what are the things that we need to communicate? Well, the first is that you have some kind of a daily briefing. And this doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long-winded. But for goodness sake, tell your team what's happening that particular day. Now, you might be thinking, but it's the same every day. But is it the same every day? Does the weather affect your business? It's not snowing now, but it was snowing here this morning. Is that going to have an impact on your business? Are there any known roadworks happening that could delay people getting to you, which means that they're going to be getting to you tempers frayed? Have you got any particular customers coming to you today that you know have got any particular preferences or any particular needs? Is there something that's not available today which people may be expecting to be able to get? Maybe there's a ride, or there's a particular feature that's not accessible, or there's something that's not available on your menu for whatever reason. So people are aware of that and that they don't look stupid when they get asked about them. And the clue there is it's a daily briefing. It needs to happen every day, and it needs to involve everybody. Now, it may not be possible always to get all of your team together, but if it's not, make sure that those little briefings happen in little pockets. So it could be that you've got somebody that represents a team or a department, a main briefing, and then it's their responsibility to then go and cascade that down to everybody else in that team or in that department. And it's very tempting that when you've got the really busy days, those are the days that you skip your daily briefings. But generally, in my experience, it's the busy days when things go wrong. So they are the days particularly where you need to be doing your briefings. Also, let people know what's happening. Now, I've talked about the daily briefing, so what's happening in your business on a daily basis, but also the bigger picture, what's happening long term. Have you got some big events coming up where there's going to be a lot of preparation that could have an impact on them? Are there things that you're now advertising, promotions coming up that they need to be aware of so that they can start promoting them, or potentially they're going to get asked questions about? What's happening in the business in terms of are there rumours going around that you're up for sale, or that you've got new management coming in? Any of those things that can actually sometimes just put people a little bit on edge, or maybe even your customers have picked up because they've read things in the press, just so that your team are aware of those things and they then know how to handle them. The what-if situations. So what do I mean by what-if situations? Well, we all know that in an ideal world, things will happen when they happen, but every so often, something goes wrong. And sometimes things go wrong more often than we would like. I know that there is somebody on the call today who had a bit of a problem with a tree falling down yesterday, and that meant that they had no BT lines and a lot of disruption, so you'll know who you are. And so how do you deal with that when things do go wrong? So your team need to be equipped for that, so that if, for example, you've had some complaints about a particular aspect of your service and that's not yet been resolved, letting your team know in advance just in case they get questioned about it or it goes wrong again today. If you know that there's been some problems with your website and there have been problems for people getting through to you, let people know how to then deal with that so that they're prepared for it, rather than looking stupid when customers raise it with them, and more importantly, discussing with them how they're then going to deal with it. So get your team prepared for the what-if situations, because things don't always run 100% according to plan, as we all know. And then finally, in terms of communication, remember, communication is a two-way process. It's not just you talking at them, it's getting some feedback from them. And the feedback that you get, whether that's in your daily briefings or in weekly, monthly meetings or just impromptu discussions in the corridor, can just make such a difference to your business. If you're getting to hear about a little idea, a little suggestion that your team have had, or a little observation that they've had, then be open and receptive to those, and we're going to talk more about that in the next section. So communication, remember, is a two-way process, and if you encourage your team to come forward with things, then you're far more likely to get that feedback and it be useful feedback. And sometimes you can nip problems in the bud before they actually become a problem and something that you have to deal with in the what-if situation. So, of the 3 key principles to getting your team taking responsibility, the first is letting them know what the heck is going on. Because if people don't know what's going on, then they can't really use their initiative or take any responsibility. Which then brings us into involvement. So, for me, there are 3 things that actually come under the heading of involvement. The first of those is actually asking for their feedback, asking for their view, asking for their input, asking them to come forward with their own ideas, whether that's to do with customer service or just the general running of the operation. And I know sometimes we can get very, very protective, particularly if it's our own business, and particularly if you're operating out of your own home, as some of you actually live on site to where your business is, and we can become protective over that. But sometimes because they're coming into it walking, going home at night and walking into it fresh every day, they'll see stuff that we just take for granted. It's a bit like the peeling paint on your kitchen walls or whatever. Sometimes you just learn to live with those things and you don't even notice them. And it's only when you've got somebody coming that you actually then, I better get that sorted. So giving your team a sense of ownership is, first of all, asking for their input, encouraging that to come forward. And the best way to encourage it is, first of all, listen to them, but also make sure that they know that you are acting on their ideas. Now, obviously not every idea that they come forward with, but at least show that you are considering the ideas that they come forward with and that you're prepared to listen. Then thinking about it from a team effort. For me, service should be seamless, and people shouldn't have, yes, people have got their specific roles and they'll have their departments that they work in, but as we saw earlier, customer doesn't really care whose job it is, that, for example, there is no loo paper. Now, if you go and tell reception, you wouldn't expect reception to say, well, that's housekeeping's problem, and actually there's no one on housekeeping now. You'll have to wait till 8 o'clock tomorrow morning till they're here. I mean, that would just be ludicrous. But it's extending that sort of principle to whatever the problem is, whatever department people are in, that they are receptive and that they are willing to do something about it. It's not my job sort of approach is even if they're not able to fix it themselves, is that they then know who to go to who can fix it. So encouraging your team to actually think about, okay, we've got something needs dealing with here. Yes, I can take ownership of that without standing on somebody's toes. And one of the things there is that encourages that is by taking the customer journey and getting them to look at everything from a customer's perspective. And if they all do other people's department and they get used to that, is that they're going to get feedback from each other. It doesn't always have to go through you, because if they're nervous about getting somebody else in trouble, allow them that flexibility that if they see something that's a problem, that they can go straight to the person in that department who can fix it. And all of that then spreads that responsibility. It gets everyone involved in ensuring that things happen even when you're not there. And then the third element of taking ownership and involvement is you being receptive to your team. You'll get people in your team who are reluctant to come forward with their own ideas, even if you ask them. And particularly reluctant to let you know when there is a problem with something, because for them it might seem like they're owning up to their own inadequacies. So you need to be observant, you need to be recognising when there are problems out there, so that you can pick up on those things quickly, you can pick up on staff concerns. Don't let things fester and become a snowball for them to become bigger problems. Nip things in the bud by being receptive and keeping your eye and ear to the ground about what's going on. And then the third of the key principles is about giving your team empowerment. So what do I mean by empowerment? Well, this is giving them license to do stuff without having to come and check with you every single step of the way. And some of the things to get started with in terms of that empowerment, yes, you're not going to start abdicating or delegating responsibility for huge chunks of things straight off, but just some ways that you can test the water with people. First of all is to encouraging your team to anticipate, think ahead about customers' needs rather than waiting to be asked, and demonstrate your trust in your team by giving them responsibility and authority to respond to customers' expectations and requests in a way that they see fit. If they think, oh, actually, yes, I know this particular customer likes X, Y, and Z, then do they need to come to you to rubber stamp it rather than them just going and dealing with that? So giving them that flexibility to do that. Developing champions. Having champions is a great way of giving people some responsibility where they have got a particular specialist knowledge or where they have a particular strength in a particular area. And that gives them that sense of pride, responsibility, that will encourage continuous improvement. And even if you don't want everybody in your team to have license to do a particular thing, if you've got a champion in that particular area and they know that they go to them first before they bother you about it, then that's helping to spread that responsibility and allowing people to use their initiative. Giving your team the skills. Now, we talked about skills as the basis that they need to do the job, but again, there comes a point when you want to stretch them. People can get bored very quickly in their job, and I'm not necessarily talking about giving them, massive responsibility and saying that they don't want that, but sometimes, they say change is as good as the rest. Giving people that little bit of a stretch in their job, giving them the skills to do something more, you'll be amazed how people rise to the occasion. And give them the skill, and that they'll just off with it and they'll run with it and they're fantastic at it. Now, obviously, it's a two-way thing. You need to be looking for where people have got those strengths, but this is working on capitalizing on people's strengths rather than trying to plug all the gaps where they've got weaknesses. That leads into then giving your team authority to deal with any unplanned situations. And what comes to mind here particularly is when there are complaints. You don't want to have every one of your team coming to you or a manager every time a customer complains about something. They need to have the wherewithal to deal with those complaints and know what license they've got to, for example, make a refund or offer something different. And that, of course, comes with practice, it comes with skill, it comes with confidence. So it's a combination of all of those things, but let them know where their authority begins and where it ends, because what you don't want to do is to find out that somebody's given away something that's like, a month's worth of your revenue. That would be crazy. So let people know where that authority ends. But giving your team authority makes it, it's a lot less stress for you, but actually it gives your team members a sense of ownership, and it's a darn sight better for your customers because it gets things resolved quickly. So they're going to get a better experience. And think about continuous improvement, because you could argue, well, everything's really good at the moment, but actually what's really good today will end up being mediocre next week or next year. So it's developing in your team is that whenever they spot something that could be just that little bit better, and I know everyone talks about going the extra mile, but actually just the extra inch can just make the difference between what it's been okay, yeah, it was okay, or oh, that was really good because I didn't get that last time. So the customer gets something a little bit different that's an improvement. So always looking for that improvement. Giving them license to make their own personal suggestions. Somebody says, oh, what do you suggest that we do today, or what do you suggest from the menu? If people have tried things for themselves, that's a heck of a lot easier for them to actually make suggestions. Now, there may be things that you want to promote on a particular day, allow them that, but also let them add in their own personal touches, because most of our customers like that genuine personal recommendation. So give them license to do that. And finishing off with, give them license to do whatever's best for your customer. So look at it from the customer's perspective. What is it that they want? What are they looking for? What's going to be the best solution for them? So we've looked so far at the number one thing to have in place. We've looked at how do we get consistency, and then we've looked at three key principles to get the team taking responsibility. Now, a lot of what we have discussed there has been down to giving people the right training and giving them the right skills in order to deliver all of those things. And one of the cost-effective ways of doing that is doing your own in-house training. But we all know that often training gets shunted down to the bottom of the priority list because we haven't got the time to sit down and actually write the training and decide what needs to go in it, what needs to go out, or we need to think about some exercises to do that. So I promised that I would just talk briefly about the offer that I have on currently for an in-house training program, and this is what I call ACE. I know it's a little bit cheesy, but it stands for Ambassadors of Customer Experience. So I've done all the hard work for you so that you can get straight into delivering your in-house training, including 8 hours of training material, and I'll tell you in a minute how that's split up, session handling notes and slides for each of those sessions, role play exercises. Now these are templates, I have to say, because obviously every business is going to be different. So there are some ideas there for a particular type of business, and then you would need to just tailor those for your own business. And some trainer's tips included to get some energizer exercises. So this is a really cost-effective way to get you started straight away for you to be able to deliver this training in-house, which means that you could actually get started on your customer service training tomorrow if you wanted to, and certainly in time for half term or for Easter. It involves, if you have a management team, it means then that you can get them involved, which means that you're going to get buy-in and you're consistent across the piece. You've got your master templates for all the content, so that you can reflect that for any of your own challenges. You can break the content down into short, sharp sessions if you like, to suit your own scheduling, and it's broken down into three modules. You can personalize or brand it how you see fit. All of the slides that are in here have a neutral background so that you can then tailor that if you have got your own in-house style that you want to then add. And then you've got some templates then to add in your own exercises. So what this program allows you to do, first of all, you're going to get that consistency. It means that you're not going to be badgered every time there's a customer query. It will help your team to use their initiative to spot additional sales. There's a whole session in there about adding value and upselling. There's a session in there or a whole section in there on dealing with customer feedback and particularly on handling complaints so that you can get those resolved quickly, and that you then know that you can be confident that all of your team, whether they're in customer-facing role or not, are able to get on with it without your full supervision all of the time. So there are three modules. Module 1 is delivering great customer service. Module 2 is about adding value and boosting sales. And Module 3 is about handling feedback and leaving a lasting impression. So the reason I'm talking about this now is because I have just updated the material, but I'm holding the material at my 2012 prices, which is £247 plus VAT. And I'm holding those prices until the 19th of February, so that's a week tomorrow, after which it's going to go up. And I'm actually, because I think that it's desperately underpriced, so it's going to be going up to £397. And if you register for this program or purchase this program before then, I'm going to include 60-minute group webinar, which is going to be Q&A, so that you can actually hit the ground running with this program, get the best absolute maximum out of it, and answer any questions that you have so that you can make it really memorable for your team. So I'm going to be giving some tips here on how to bring the training to life for you to get the most from it. And if you're one of the first 5 people to register, I've got 2 additional bonuses. The first of those is an extra 30-minute one-to-one mentoring session with me to personally guide you through. So once you've got all of the material, you've been through it all, you've had an opportunity to digest the information that's in there, have 30 minutes with me to answer any questions that you've got with getting the best from the training. And in addition to that, there's going to be hand-holding email support between now and Easter, so that as you're working your way through it and you're delivering it, if you've got, not really quite sure about that, you know that you can just drop me an email and I'll get back to you within 24 hours to respond to that for any issues that you've got. And that's up until Good Friday. So just to summarise, the investment on that is £247 plus VAT. And I have used all of this material in many different types of businesses, so I do know it works, so that's why I have no hesitation at all in including a no risk guarantee. But it's only available at this price until the 19th of February, and only the first 5 will qualify for the additional bonuses. So if you want to be able to get some of these things into practice, then go to www.ace, which is naturallyloyal.com. So that's at www.ace.naturallyloyal.com, and I will put that up again at the end. Okay, so finally, 5 easy ways to reward your team. Bring a smile to their face and a smile to yours, because it won't be costing you an absolute fortune, and in turn bring a smile to your customer's face as well, because you're going to have happy staff. Hooray! So what are the 5 ways that we can do this? So 5 ways to recognise your team. Well, before we go into those 5, what you really need to do is to understand your team members, because what works for one won't necessarily work for everybody. So when we're talking about incentives, sometimes we can really unwittingly demotivate somebody because of the incentive that we give them. And, we think, well, actually money's a universal thing, everyone wants money, but actually sometimes, if we give somebody even, £50 or £100 bonus, how quickly do they forget that compared with something that they've maybe experienced? So I'm going to give you sort of 5 alternatives to the financial reward. And, some of these things will work for some of your team and some of them, others will work for different ones. And just to give you an example, I was working for a company, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. And one of the managers there said that, well, by way of recognition, he actually put forward one of his team members as Employee of the Month. It was fairly large organisation, so Employee of the Month got a fair bit of a profile. And this guy was absolutely mortified and took out a grievance against his boss for nominating him for Employee of the Month. So, I was absolutely bowled over by this, but it just goes to show that what motivates one person doesn't necessarily motivate everybody. So we do need to find out what makes them tick and what's important to them. So what are the 5 simple ways? Well, the first one, really, really simple, is to say thank you. And that's not just necessarily saying thank you at the end of a busy shift or, the sort of thank you that you might say in passing, but going out of your way to say thank you. So let's say you've had a really, really horrendous day because you've had a lot of people in, it's been a big event, or there have been a lot of particular problems. Going out of the way to get the team together and saying, thank you so much, I really appreciate the effort that you've all put in today. But what that tells you about them as well, and how touched you are by their contribution and the hard work that they've done. And if individuals need to be singled out, then single out those individuals. Just be careful that you don't end up with a teacher's pet that's always the one that's getting the pat on the back. So give them some feedback. Tell them what they've done well, how it's contributed. Celebrate and share successes with the team or individually, depending on what's appropriate. The second thing to do is to give them a little treat. Let them go out for the day somewhere. We've seen earlier about you going out for a little treat. What are the things that would be a little treat for individual members of your team? I know that I've been bought bottles of champagne and boxes of chocolates. Well, actually, neither of them really do it for me, because I can't drink champagne because it makes me ill, and I get migraines, so I don't eat chocolate. So this again comes back to why it's so important to tailor what you give people. It could be a little gift, it could be just a little something, or it could be something like a little day, a day out somewhere. And if you're, the alternative is 50 quid M&S voucher, which they'll spend in seconds flat and will be forgotten the next day, or 50 quid that you spent on them going somewhere and having a really nice time. Or maybe it's something, if you want to go, bit more overboard, something for them and their partner, or somebody, or they choose somebody within the team to take with them. And sometimes that can be a win-win, because that little treat may be going and looking at a sister business or another business or even a competitor to see what they're doing. So it's a day out, but with a little bit of a twist that, yeah, you want something in return, but there is some mileage in it for both of you. So think about what's the treat, and something that people will remember. For some people, the most valuable thing that you can give them is time. You think about those people within your team that have got, they're always juggling work and their home life. Maybe they're a carer, so that they've got a sick or elderly relative that they look after. Or they work a particular shift, which means that there is something that it's always a bit of a problem for them to get to, and they would really like to do it every so often. Maybe giving them the time to do that. That may even be just like an hour's lie-in one morning. It doesn't have to be a whole day off or a couple of days off. It could just be an hour here or there. Again, what is appropriate for that individual, and what is appropriate in terms of the scale of the reward that you're giving them or the recognition that you're giving them. But time can be such a simple thing that effectively costs you nothing at the end of the day. A little bit of competition. Now that could be competition within your team, having some kind of a league table, for example, which you might want to change that every month, have a different league table for different things so that people, when they've got strengths in different areas, so sometimes it might be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's just a nice way, it's a good way of getting the camaraderie amongst the team. You don't want something where it's always going to be the same flipping person that wins it, because that just gets so boring and it doesn't incentivize everybody else. Entering them for awards. Entering somebody for an award or a team for an award really sort of shows that you think that they're worthy of it, and that is a great accolade to have. I can remember when I worked in the corporate world, our sales director putting me forward for an award for sales trainer of the year, and just being nominated. I did actually get shortlisted, which I was absolutely delighted about, but just the fact that he felt that I was good enough to be put forward, that was a real feather in my cap, and I appreciated it, all the more so because it had come from him and not from my boss, that it was like a sort of, he was my client effectively. So that was a really, really nice touch. So looking at ways that you can get people put forward for awards as well, or entering for any other type of competition. Because what that then does is it brings people together, it gets that recognition, and also if it's an external reward, it's a good way of recognising the whole team as well. And then finally is looking at opportunities for your team. What are the things that you could be doing to stretch your team? Because, if you asked any one of your team members, do they still want to be doing that job in 10 years' time? I can pretty much guarantee they're going to say no. So what are the stepping stones towards getting there? What are the opportunities that you can be giving them to groom them for something different, something better? Could be something that has more responsibility or more money, or it could just be grooming them for something that's a better fit for them, something that they're going to enjoy more, or even maybe grooming them for, having an opportunity to do fewer hours, so that if they are somebody that's time poor, that they've got more time to spend at home with their loved ones or their children or whatever. So looking at those development opportunities. You can't always accommodate everyone's aspirations, particularly if you're a small business. But just thinking about what ways can you stretch them, give them exposure to different things, maybe different skills. So those are my 5 ways to help to give your team some recognition. So let's just sum up on the 6 strategies that we've talked about on this call. So strategy number 1 was letting people know what you want from them, what you expect from them, and what your customers expect from them, and then communicating that. Number 2, giving them the knowledge, the skills, the resources, and the confidence in order to do that, so that you're then going to get that consistency. Number 3, communicate with your team and make sure that's 2-way communication, not just you talking at them, but you listening to them as well. So telling them what's happening on a daily basis, weekly basis, what's happening in the business overall, so that they feel part of that team. Involving them in the decisions, asking for their views, getting them engaged to spot opportunities, getting them to look at things from your customer's perspective. And we touched on the customer journey, but getting everyone in your team to do that. Empowering your team, so they're not bound by all this red tape and it's that's not your job, that's my job. Allowing them to make decisions if they can spot opportunities that is going to be the best thing for that particular customer. And finally, giving them some recognition that doesn't have to cost you a lot of money, but that's tailored to the individual and what's important to them. So just to leave you on this note, just to reflect on what's been the most useful part of today's webinar for you. What are the things that we discussed today that you either need to start doing, maybe stop doing, or maybe you're doing but could do a little bit more of? And what are the things that you could put into practice tomorrow? And just as a reminder, here's a summary of what you get with the Ambassadors of Customer Service programme. So all the hard work's done for you, 8 hours of training material, session handling notes, role play exercises, trainers' tips on how to get your delegates engaged, and those bonuses of the 60-minute group webinar. You need to register by midday on the 19th of February to qualify for that. And if you want to be one of the first 5 to register, then I would suggest that you get onto that immediately after this call for extra 30-minute one-to-one mentoring session with me to personally guide you through all of the program and the answer any questions that you've got on the training, and knowing that you have got that email support from me right up until Easter so that you can really get that training embedded in. So as a reminder, investment from you is 247. There's a no risk guarantee, so if you download it and you think, no, this isn't for me, this isn't right for my business, then that's not a problem. So if you're interested in that, you go to www.ace, for Ambassadors for Customer Experience, .naturallyloyal.com. So I'm going to open up the lines. I know that it's just gone 5 o'clock, but I'm just going to open up the lines in case anybody has any questions. Anyone have any questions? Just raise your hand if you have a question, and then I will unmute you. Nothing coming through. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye. This has been Caroline Cooper. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to speak to you again very soon. Bye for now. Hi, Rosaline. Do you have a question?